Hello everyone, Chris Guthrie here, host of SellerCast, and on today's episode I speak with Brian Burt, who's been selling on Amazon for less than a year, is doing 6 figures per month, and is shooting for a goal of 7 figures per month before the end of 2016. And so it's a very ambitious goal, and so we talk about that process behind how he's trying to accomplish that goal and some of the systems and plans that he has in place to do that. And so if you're trying to learn how you can scale your business from where you're at and where you can go in the future, then a lot of what we talked about today you'll enjoy. So let's start the recording, and I'm sure you'll like this episode. Hello everyone, Chris Guthrie here, and today I have a guest on the show, Brian Burt. Welcome.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Yeah. So I'm so excited for you to be on to talk about your experience as well. Let's get into it. So how long have you been selling on Amazon for?
Yeah, so I've been private labeling now for about 10 months, give or take a month here or there, depending on what day you actually want to say you've gotten in. If you include some of the research and learning, I'd say it's been about 11 months.
Okay, so it didn't take too long then actually to pick your first product. Then, if it was only about 11 months, then so about a month or so of initial research.
Yeah, it was about a month of learning and research. I was doing them a bit concurrently, but I'm not a big fan of just sitting around twiddling my thumbs. I kind of want to take action. I haven't been known for my patience in the past, so I got right to it.
Well, let's get back to the past then before we get up to the present. Then, so what were you doing before starting to sell physical products on Amazon? Did you have other online businesses that you were running before?
Yeah, I do actually. I've got some pretty extensive history in the internet marketing space. So I've been online now full time for about 10 years almost. So kind of makes me like an antique in the industry, I think. But I still have a few other businesses. So I have a client SEO business. I run a successful pay-per-lead business, among a few other things. But yeah, that's really where it all came from. And, it's given me a few advantages moving forward.
So is it just a matter of you heard about this just because of the general, it being kind of popular, people talking about it a lot on various blogs, and then you thought, hey, let me just try this as well?
Yeah, dude, actually, it's a funny story. I was doing some high-end coaching, the $5,000 plus a month coaching for pay-per-lead. And one of my students, one of the stipulations I always have is, whatever you're doing, you have to have a myopic focus. So you can't focus on anything else, and I need you here the whole time. Don't go after the shiny object that's coming around every single corner. We call it shiny object syndrome, right?
Yeah.
So I said, he came to me and he said, Brian, I know you said don't chase the shiny object, but this is a really fantastic opportunity. I've actually hunted down another high-end coach. And it's for Amazon. I was like, and he's a smart guy. And I said, sure, no problem. As long as you make sure you're not focusing on anything but pay-per-lead and Amazon. He said, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Within 3 months, he had gone from zero to over $50,000 a month. And that knocked my socks off because that's faster than anything I had seen at the time. So fast forward another 3 months, and he was at over $100,000 in revenue. And by that point, I had no choice. The student had become the teacher. And so I said, listen, dude, you got to teach me. What are you doing here? So he showed me, and, in a very small amount of time, I was up and rocking and rolling.
That's great. So 11 months now is from the time you started learning, and about 10 months selling. So where are you at right now sales-wise? Are you able to just share that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're right around the $120,000 to $150,000 a month mark at the time that this podcast is recorded, but that's increasing month over month pretty exponentially here.
That's great. Yeah. And so just for context, it's the last day of February that we're recording here. So then what did you learn along the way? I mean, I know obviously that having that, the student that became the teacher, so to speak, helped maybe a little bit just in terms of telling you, this is what I'm doing. But what did you kind of do along the way? I mean, did you really jump in with both feet? Did you do a smaller order to start out? I'm kind of curious about how you got going and then what you've done to ramp up so quickly.
Right.
We've had a lot of guests on that have done well pretty quickly, so I'm always curious to see what the common thread is.
Yeah, I made one of the if looking back, hindsight is 2020, and I made a pretty big mistake, believe it or not, in the beginning. I went after a product that was super hot at the time. It was a fad, but it was good for about 2 months, and that was enough to kind of jettison me into my next product and provide. I only started with about $2,500 to $3,500 in total. And I wanted Amazon private labeling to live on its own merit. So I didn't make a loan from one business to another, I said, hey, listen, if this does not work, then that is money I've lost, and I won't pursue anything more with private labeling on Amazon. It worked out pretty well. We did make a decent amount of cash. I don't remember exactly how much the first month and the second month, but I know by the third month we were cresting the $40,000 mark, and that was really impressive to me. I'd never had a business take off that quickly. I've had other six-figure businesses that were doing the six-figure a month or $1 million a year mark, but this was really the first one that got to the $500,000 so quickly. I had a few stumbles along the way after that. We ran out of inventory, as everybody does, and we only started with about 1,000 units. And when it's your first foray into e-commerce or physical products, it's really kind of difficult to gauge how quickly that's going to come and go. And if you're doing it right, it goes pretty darn fast.
Definitely. And so then now, as you start to grow your business, have you been adding a lot more products, or what's your plan for this? Are you looking to eventually sell off your other businesses because this has grown so fast, or is it maybe you like kind of have the additional revenue streams?
Yeah, it's funny because I think success goes where attention flows, right? And because this has taken off so quickly, I've really kind of reallocated my resource. I mean, I had the big office, I had the big staff. Flashback a year ago, I was still in the office. I still had the staff. And, I looked around one day and I realized I was kind of landlocked to the office and to the staff. And I don't know about you or anyone else listening, but when I first started marketing online, the idea was not to be locked into your office in a brick and mortar or even in your home. The idea was really for me to be location independent and to set up a business that was creating revenue no matter what. If I was sleeping, if I was at a baseball game, if I was on a date with my wife, or just playing with my kids or doing whatever I really love. That was the reason I started marketing online, because 10 years ago it was a dream. I think more and more people are realizing that that's very possible now with private labeling. And so to answer your question, I liquidated the office. I got rid of a lot of my staff, and we're down to just 3 people, including myself now and my wife. And we've got one employee full-time. She's phenomenal. She's been with us for 2 years. And my wife handles a lot of the details. I'm kind of the big picture guy. And then, of course, our employee, Anna, she does a lot of the product research and negotiations and day-to-day customer service. So it's really been great because, we've been able to kind of get out of that position that felt, I don't know, kind of claustrophobic.
Yeah, that's an interesting summary kind of the path that I think people will face when they first get into building an online business and doing it full time. I think that's a very common goal, to be able to work from home by yourself. And then maybe you're like, well, my ambition's growing. Maybe I'd like to try and build something bigger. Maybe I need the office to build something bigger. And then now you've kind of come back and be like, well, I don't necessarily need it.
I've done everything.
So it's kind of
I went from no office to small office to medium to large office, all the way back to where I started. And I've never been happier. And for anyone thinking they need an office right now, I would starkly disagree. I would highly recommend not getting an office and focusing more of your time on your staff and the people and the relationships with your suppliers and your employees, because that makes all the difference. It really does. We get more productivity out of our staff now than we did when we had the office. So there it is.
Yeah, that's great. And I know you mentioned that you have the other businesses still, so and a lot of your time is still focused on Amazon. So how much time would you say you spend per week on this business then, as it is?
In the private label business?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think any part of the success I've had, almost in anything, and most definitely in Amazon, has been due to being, one, I'm pretty crazy just as a human. But in the fact that I get completely obsessed, you can ask my wife, she loves it, and, doesn't love it kind of simultaneously, but I believe in the power of full immersion and becoming, almost myopic, right? So I get obsessed and I get really deeply into things. And that's what I did with this business. So I spend a lot of time focusing on it because I enjoy it. I'm addicted to product research. I mean, I don't know how many times you refresh your little app on your phone for your Amazon Seller Central account, but I do it 3 times a minute sometimes. I'm always in there looking at my numbers and analyzing and, Some days my emotions go way up when we're doing really well and way down when we're not. And, maybe that's not super healthy, but it is the reason that I've gotten to where I am, I think, and soon to be where I'm going, which is the $250,000 a month and then the $1 million a month goal. I've actually got a whiteboard behind me. You guys can't see it right now, but anywhere I go, I paint a giant wall with whiteboard paint, and written on this wall right now, and I've shown you, Chris, it's got the $1 million a month goal. So that will not come down until I get to that goal. And I can see it happening here because in this business, it is exponential growth. But if I were to come away from this business, I wouldn't have to spend more than an hour, not even an hour a day. I only do it because, like I said, I'm a little crazy and very obsessed.
That's great. And I think that's also inspiring that you have a goal for so much larger. I think that a lot of times people are so focused on, just getting that first maybe 10K a month. And once they hit it, it's almost like they're so surprised they even hit it in the first place. And then it's like, okay, where to go next? And so I would actually I'd like to try and dive in a little bit more in terms of how you're actually planning to get there. So I know that you get really obsessed with it. You are spending a lot of time researching. You're always looking at your sales stats. And it's funny, I draw parallels to that with way back in like 2005 when I first started making money from AdSense websites. I remember refreshing my stats to see the clicks. So I made an extra buck or so.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But yeah, but what I'm curious though is, how do you actually go from 100K to $1 million a month, right? I'd love to know the process that you've thought about and how you're planning to achieve that, and maybe along with the timeline. And I think that might give a sense for people that are trying to get to that 6-figure a month mark that you're already at, and then maybe where to go after that.
Yeah, I'll do it in 2016. I'm confident that we'll get to the $1 million a month in 2016 mark because, in my opinion, going from $0 to over 100,000 or 150 where we're at now is more difficult than going from that $100,000 a month mark to the $1 million a month mark. In the fact that it's kind of akin to wind resistance and high-end sports cars, right? So it's really easy for a lot of cars to get to 0 to 180 miles an hour. But then every mile an hour over that, it becomes increasingly difficult. So it takes as much energy to get to 200 as it does to take a high-end sports car from 0 to 180, if that makes sense. And being that Amazon is highly capital intensive, either you start with a lot of capital or you build it up from the ground, which is what we did. And now that we've got that working capital to continually reinvest, and that's really the trick, is that continual reinvestment without taking much off the table. But if you're out there listening and Amazon is your primary business, I understand that you do have to take some off the table. I would say if you've got big goals like me, you really want to leave as much in as you can. See, I'd be okay eating tuna out of cans or sleeping on, concrete cinder blocks. That doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is being obsessed and getting to your goal. And that's kind of who I am. Of course, my wife will probably tell you differently. She doesn't want to sleep on cinder blocks, but
it's a good balance.
She keeps me balanced. But yeah, I think that's really the one part of it is you need the capital. And there are some businesses that are time intensive, and then there's some businesses that are capital intensive. And Amazon is certainly not time intensive. It is more capital intensive than anything else. So now that we do have the working capital, that is half of the equation. The other half of the equation, I'd be happy to share if you want to hear it, Chris.
Yeah. No, that's a great start. And I think that I just wanted to interject briefly because I do believe that, again, even going back to smaller sellers, it's just something that I've seen and from the conversations I've had with these sellers. And it's just maybe anecdotal, but a lot of people don't think, as soon as they make their first whatever mark it is, and it's usually, relatively lower, it's like, okay, when can I start taking money out? But really, the sooner you can keep reinvesting, the faster you're going to be able to grow, just as you've said. And it completely makes sense with the amount of money you need to be able to get up to that inventory level to hit that mark. I've talked to people that have lead times of 6 months because they're shipping everything via sea, and they have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars out at sea basically,
right,
while they're waiting for the new inventory to come in. And so it takes a while to work up to that. But that was the first half of what you're doing to accomplish it. What's the second half?
Yeah, that is. So that's kind of the first equation is make money, prove a viable product, prove that you have the template to pick good products to sell. For me, I see a lot of people in the communities that I've birthed and a lot of the other communities out there. Um, I think they come kind of from a scarcity mindset where, oh, there's not enough products or there's too much competition. And in a sense, they are correct. Overall, I don't think they are, but in a sense, they are. And that being that if you're looking at the smaller products where you're kind of following everybody's advice out there, I'm sure you've heard it. It has to fit into the shoebox and it's got to be lightweight and it can't be moving parts or electronics and all that.
Yeah.
If you're trying to follow those guidelines and it's got to be under, $40, because that's the quote unquote sweet spot. So you can't see me. I'm throwing air quotes over here.
That's fine. I can feel them.
I think that's all solid advice if you're getting started and you can be successful that way. But for me, it was, prove that you're good at picking products, and then, start stacking the capital, start raising some money, keeping that seed fund, continually reinvesting. And now the plan is not to go after, any of that quote unquote traditional advice, but really to take it to the next level. So I'm looking at products way outside of that box. I'm looking at products that are, $200, $225, $250, $500 products that are big, that are heavy, that are clunky, that have moving parts, because that is rarefied air up there on Amazon. There's nobody competing at these levels, but they're making $300,000, $500,000 a month in the off season. So to me, if I can figure out a way to make it work in that space, and I've already done it with a few products. So the first part is, raise capital, reinvest capital. And then the second part is be able to find and exist in a space that most people think they can't.
That's great. So it sounds like then initially you were doing some of those products that fit within that range, the fit in the shoebox, under $40, air shippable, et cetera. And then you've just recently started doing, or maybe earlier, but you have a few products that are kind of up in that higher price point or that are more barriers to entry, for example. Mm-hmm. And then that's what you're focusing on right now as you try and scale to $1 million a month.
That's it right there in a nutshell. And I think that the harder something seems to do, the less people that are going to attempt it. And yes. If you can be, I consider myself, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, right? I don't have the best plan. My work ethic is pretty good, but I'm not the fastest, but I won't quit running before anybody else. That's what I always say, right? You'll get out of the race before I do. And so I'm pretty tenacious, but also I like to think I'm a good problem solver. So if you can get to a place like a very high dollar item on Amazon where you can figure out and solve enough problems to the point where that actually works, I think that you will keep a good distance between yourself and your competitors. And in fact, I'm proving it right now with some of my products.
Yeah, and for people that are listening, if you've been listening to every episode, and I'll link to these in the show notes, but there have been several guests that have come on now, and a lot of their success has come from the approach of looking for products outside of the typical range. And it's just because simply by the fact that just not as many people are looking for them. And also sometimes there's more barriers to entry. If it's a product that's heavier, then you pretty much have to sea ship in some cases to be able to make the margins work. And so again, that's just something that maybe some people don't want to deal with because they're like, well, they've always heard that air shipping is easier. And so it's kind of nice to, again, continue to hear that from people, especially when you're already at that stage and then trying to scale up to $1 million a month. So that's awesome.
Yeah. If you're out there and you're listening right now and somebody tells you not to do this, or you see, the majority of Amazon sellers and the going recommendations are to do X, do Y, do something completely different, or at least explore it. If I hear a lot of people talking about one thing, I will very typically do the opposite.
Yes, that's good. That's great. So beyond that approach, well, how about this? If you're planning to hit it in 2016, which is very ambitious, and that's fantastic, especially if you do. And it sounds like even from the little bit of time we've been talking, and I know we spoke a little before, that you can do that. So what's that next after that?
Yeah. I don't know, Aruba and a little shack where I sell $2 Coronas, I think.
Yeah, you think at that point, would you decide, okay, $1 million a month, this is a business that I can sell for multiple millions of dollars, presumably, and maybe that's what you shoot for? Or is it, okay, I have my products, let's just start pulling more cash out of it instead of reinvesting as much, and now I can, keep it at that level type of thing?
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm having way too much fun. Two, it's really not about, it is about the money, right? Yeah, anyone that says it's not about the money is completely full of it. But, once you hit a certain dollar a month mark, it becomes more or less a challenge. I think if you're really ambitious, a lot of what
True.
a lot of what I struggled with and then saw a rapid decline. It was kind of one of the stumbling blocks in my Amazon career. Was I got very kind of complacent with it when it hit the $50,000 to $60,000 a month mark. And hovering around roughly a 40 to 50% profit margin there. It's a nice little income, and it goes almost automatically. I came away from it. I focused on some of my other businesses, and like anything that you don't pay attention to, it started having issues and problems that I had to get back to. So, I became complacent a bit. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of people don't see coming. I think a lot of people just think, oh, dude, it's going to be so nice when I get to $25,000 or $50,000 a month or even $10,000 a month. But what happens at that point is staying on the fire, staying ambitious and staying hungry is definitely a challenge. So for me, I try not to focus on the money aspect of it anymore. I just try to beat my last day. So if we did 5,000 yesterday, which I think we almost did a little bit less, then I want to do 5,100 today and 5,200 the next day and 5,300 the next day. And what's it going to take to get there? So really, I start to play a little game with it, and then I need to get to the goal, which is over 10,000 a day.
I like that. So then, what else have you been doing to? Well, I want to go back. Actually, it's one of the things you mentioned when you were at the 25 to 50, and you felt a little, or maybe I think it was 50 to 60, but you said you felt a little complacent, and then some issues cropped up. What were some of those issues? Are you able to talk about them?
Yeah, I mean, so if you're not paying as close of attention to your competition, they will infiltrate, and if you're not paying, let's be honest. The first page of I come from the SEO world where the first page of Google is a battlefield. And, you have to protect it. So, I get very competitive about my listings. And I think that was something that I walked away from a little bit when I started hitting the $50,000 to $60,000 a month mark, and not paying attention to all the details. So customer service was a really big part of that. Also, we had some issues with keeping inventory in stock. Our supplier actually, I'm almost 100% sure, swapped our product for another product. So we were sending at that point directly to Amazon. And when they know you're doing that, I think that quality can suffer sometimes. Mm-hmm. I think that's what happened. So our reviews started going down, not to mention that one of our extremely successful products, as I mentioned in the beginning, was a fad. And everybody started getting into that space.
Yeah.
In fact, I think ASM used it as one of their examples throughout their whole course. So
yeah,
everybody jumped in.
Yeah, that's actually sort of an interesting phenomenon by itself. Is how many people will hear an example either listed on a podcast or a course or whatever, and then for whatever reason they just get after that one product for some reason. But anyway, so that's interesting. So the fact that you were having them put the UPS labels on the cartons, mm-hmm. and then they knew they were going direct to Amazon, that's maybe why they took advantage a little bit there. So are you paying for an inspection service now, or was it just a matter of kind of keeping a closer eye on the supplier?
Yeah, it was, for some of my products, I am. For my higher mm-hmm. dollar value products, I definitely am. For some of the lower things, no, it's just a matter of letting them know that you're aware that your reviews are slipping a bit. Mm-hmm. And I actually had to source a few more suppliers too. And if anyone out there has ever been through that, you know what a nightmare that can be, is trying to find new suppliers, and just trying to find one good one can take a little trial and error. But overall, yeah, I do have them land here for my higher dollar items, and the other ones I just send directly.
Okay. And so finding a secondary supplier, you're right. Once you found one, it's challenging enough to find one. Are you going through that effort of finding a secondary supplier when you're launching some of these products already, or do you kind of wait until a product comes up, or wait till the product starts to sell well, and then consider looking for a secondary supplier just as a just in case scenario?
That is a really good question. So what we do, and what I'm a huge fan of, is I'm a really big fan of automation, right? So I get obsessed, and then I create systems and procedures so that I can eventually have everything automated and not have to deal with it. So we wrote, really essentially compartmentalized it into 3 separate categories, which was, product research. That's a checklist that we have. It's really well documented. We've been, it's been evolving almost since the beginning. We use Google Drive. We keep it in there. I've actually kind of nerded out on it a little bit and printed it out and like 3-hole punched it and put it into a binder and everything. the whole system of everything we do. So the first part is really product research, and that's kind of our own proprietary hybrid with some other really smart people that have helped me figure out how to create a really good system to find products. Then I've got a pre-launch checklist, and I believe that is close to 78. I think it is exactly 78 items. That's the nice thing about a checklist is you can just hand it off to somebody on your team or a VA, and it's stupid simple to follow. You just check it when it's done, and it's done. And then the post-launch checklist. So it's the three parts. And the post-launch is all the marketing, the giveaways, how to manage reviews, how to aggregate more reviews. I mean, we even go out to YouTube unboxers. We get out there and ask them in our niche and ask them to review our products. And then we have a whole process by which we download those videos and redistribute them. So for us, it starts at product research. We make sure we get the listing correct, and then it doesn't end. We just continually kind of rinse and repeat that.
Okay. And so we're getting a little bit closer to the end here, but what I wanted to kind of close on was, what are you doing of those things that you mentioned? There's a lot on the checklist. Obviously, we can't get into everything, but let's talk about the launch process, right? So what are the things that you're doing that are outside the norm? Since that's kind of been a bit of the theme here, I think this episode is that you're always looking for what other people aren't doing and then focusing a lot on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
What are some of those things?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I'm not going to give you all the secret sauce, but I'll give you a few pieces of the puzzle.
Let's a few nuggets. How about that?
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to help. So as I mentioned, one of the things we do after the product is live, then we will immediately reach out to what we like to call key influencers in our industry or our niche, and specifically YouTube unboxers. And then from there, we'll go out to bloggers, podcasters, et cetera, and ask for reviews. A lot of the times, they'll go out there and do it for free. We are just now starting to explore Instagram key influencers. So there's a lot of buzz going right now about how to get a hold of these key influencers. We kind of have our own method to doing that. We've tested it to some success, and it looks to be the up and coming way to get great reviews and a lot of exposure. Also, this hasn't been verified, but I'm a big believer in sending traffic from off of Amazon to Amazon. I think you get internally rewarded by the algorithm.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard that or not.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. So we're doing a lot of that. And the nice thing is when you have a few or more products that are out there, we're close to 20 now. You start making relationships with some of these people and they start to know you. And if you treat them well, I mean, relationships are really what it's all about, right? So if you treat them well, and they'll come back and they'll gladly review your products. And that's really, that's kind of it. We have a few other things we're doing, but yeah, that's really the core of our post-launch process.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I've heard a lot on the Instagram side as well. One thing that, and maybe you do this as well, but one thing people have mentioned is they just look for Instagram followers or Instagram profiles that have an email address listed. And it's like, if they have an email address listed, then they're interested in being contacted. Sort of like the top Amazon reviewers. If they have their email address listed, then, contact them and ask them to do reviews. And if it's an Instagram person, then you can contact them and say, hey, would you like to do this?
That's exactly what we're doing. Yeah.
It's awesome. Well, cool.
In fact, if you want me to share a tip on that, I can share just one quick tip.
Sure, yeah.
So, going out to Instagram and creating a following is pretty important when you're doing that. And we kind of leverage, a lot of it is, of course, based upon your tags and what you use, your hashtags. There's a site out there called Tags for Likes. So it's tags, FOR, likes.com. All you have to do is put in your niche, and it will spit out, I believe, the top 30 or top 50 most popular tags for that niche. So every post we make now, we're using those tags. But here's the trick. You don't want to put those tags in your post. Put them in your first comment.
Awesome.
And that's a really easy way to build up your followership. I mean, some of our new brands that we've launched, we've gotten to over 10,000 Instagram followers, in a matter of months just by using that strategy alone.
Fantastic. Well, it's a good closing nugget to finish out on then. Thanks so much, Brian, for coming on and sharing some of your strategies. And I think that especially too, your your emphasis on systems and automation and having checklists for everything in the business is really something that the people that I think that are trying to get to your level really need to have in place, because it's so challenging to recreate all of that work over and over again if you aren't documenting your processes. And so it's great to hear that that's exactly what you've done and is partially responsible for helping you growing so well.
Yeah, and that's all a lot easier when you get obsessed. So
that too. So yeah, thanks again, Brian.
All right, Chris, I appreciate it. Thanks, man. Take care.
All right, and that was the episode with Brian. Hopefully you enjoyed some of the practices he talked about in terms of trying to scale his business to $1 million per month. And hopefully you can apply those as well in your business so you can work on scaling your numbers up as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you'd like to check out the show notes, you can go to sellercast.com/29. And also, you can also go back to sellercast.com if you want to see a list of all the other previous episodes, if you want to dive in and see what else we've been talking about on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.